The police had their guns drawn on my 16-year-old son, and all he was doing was placing flowers on his brother's grave. One moment, Nathan was kneeling in the garden, his hand trembling as he rested it gently on the flag-draped wooden urn. The next, a booming voice shattered the silence. "Get on the ground." Half a dozen officers charged through our yard like they were raiding a cartel compound, and all because of a neighbor named Susan, who saw a suspicious teen with a shovel and weapon doing something cult-like on HOA property. Except it wasn't cult-like. It was sacred. She had no idea the boy was saying goodbye to his older brother, or that the woman calmly stepping between her son and the loaded weapons was the United States Attorney General. But let's go back. It started 2 weeks earlier when I made the choice to bury my eldest son, James, at home. We own 5 acres, a piece of land that's been in my family for generations, long before the HOA came along and boxed us in with plastic fences and perfect lawns. Legally, our property is registered as a private burial site. It's an old Southern rule, one Susan either didn't understand or didn't care about. James' final wish was simple: to rest beneath the old oak tree he used to climb as a kid, and for his little brother Nathan to place the first flowers. So we honored that, quietly, respectfully, with dignity. But to Susan, grief looked messy. It didn't fit her idea of neighborhood charm. That morning, the sky was a soft gray, like it too was morning. Nathan wore James' old scout jacket. Sleeves too long, heart too full. It was just us. Family. A chaplain. A folded flag. A simple hymn playing from a small speaker. Nathan stepped forward with wildflowers and James' dog tags. He knelt, whispered something, and kissed a wooden urn. Then came Susan. Her voice sliced through the quiet. "What's going on here?" She stood at the edge of her manicured lawn like a warden, arms folded, judgment on her face. "You can't bury people wherever you want. This is HOA land." I tried to explain again that this was our land, federally recorded. HOA rules didn't apply here. But Susan never listened. She didn't see a mourning family. She saw something that lowered property values. 15 minutes later, while we stood in silence around James' resting place, we saw the flashing lights. Police cruisers filled the driveway like we were fugitives. And then came the yelling, hands where I can see them. Nathan froze. His hands twitched halfway between his sides and the sky. His eyes locked on the guns pointed at his chest. I moved forward, heart pounding, breath tight, but calm. I was the country's top law enforcement officer. But in that moment, I was just a mother watching her last living son be treated like a threat. I pulled out my badge, the one I've carried since the day I took my oath. I'm Elizabeth Carter, United States Attorney General. Stand down. The lead officer's face drained of color. He looked like he'd stepped into a thunderstorm in flip-flops. Meanwhile, Susan stood at her driveway with her phone up, filming like she'd caught someone double-parked. "I'll be pressing charges," she snapped. "That boy threatened me with a stick." The stick was a folded flagpole. One officer mumbled something into his radio, likely verifying my ID. 30 seconds later, the entire mood shifted. The guns were lowered. The tension cracked. Nathan collapsed into a sitting position, shaking. And Susan, she chirped with a fake smile. I was just protecting the community. Their rules. "Yes," I said. "And as the Attorney General, I intend to enforce every one of them." Later that day, once Nathan was safe inside, I walked the edge of our property and noticed 2 cameras, pointed directly into our yard, installed by Susan. She'd even posted a metal sign. HOA regulated zone. Trespassers will be fined. And she'd already sent us a cease and desist letter, claiming our private burial violated community tranquility standards. But Susan didn't know what I knew. The HOA she worshipped, it was rotting from the inside. For years, I'd ignored the rumors, tried to live peacefully. But that morning, that injustice, it lit a fire in me. So I made one call, not a public move, just a quiet message to a Department of Justice investigator, asking them to take a peek into the HOA's books. What we expected was minor corruption. What we found was worse. Wire fraud, elder abuse, misuse of community funds. It wasn't just mismanaged. It was Susan's personal gold mine. And by dragging the federal government into her tantrum, she just invited a reckoning. The next morning, the entire neighborhood felt it. The silence was heavier. Even Susan's yard decorations looked nervous. One of her plastic flamingos had tipped over, like it fainted from the drama. From my porch, I watched the neighbors walk by quickly, avoiding eye contact. Some offered faint waves. Others ducked behind bushes. They'd lived under Susan's thumb for years. But that thumb was starting to snap. Of course, Susan didn't back down. She posted in the HOA's private forum that I had faked my title to intimidate the board, and that Nathan had been parading military theatrics to terrorize the block. She even posted blurry photos of him holding the folded flag. The caption? Suspicious youth in camo, armed and dangerous. Someone commented, "Isn't that the Attorney General's son?" Her reply? Not confirmed. Might be crisis actors. That's when I called David, a Department of Justice investigator who looked like someone's gentle math teacher. But behind that soft voice was a man who could tear down empires with a spreadsheet, and he was about to start with Pine View Estates. "I want you to start with the finances," I told David. "Then dig deeper. No rush." He nodded once and disappeared into the kind of files that ruin people quietly and permanently. While he went to work, Susan shifted into full panic mode. She started handing out flyers in the neighborhood, wearing a visor and windbreaker like she was running for office. The papers read, "Community safety and standards under attack." Then came the emergency HOA meeting. The moment Nathan and I walked into the clubhouse, heads turned. Susan gripped the microphone like a lifeline. Her voice cracked, but she pushed forward anyway. "We need to address property misuse," she began. "There was an unauthorized funeral last week. There were flags, weapons, children in distress." I raised my hand. Calm, controlled. Our land is exempt. That's been on file since 1979. Susan smirked. "Anyone can file something. Doesn't make it legal." Nathan, never one to speak unless it mattered, opened a folder and read aloud. "State exemption for family cemeteries notarized. Deed predates the HOA by 20 years. Federal protections for military burials apply." The room went still. Someone whispered, "Oh, wow." Susan tried to shift gears. "It's not about the burial, it's the flags. The noise, the emotional impact." I stared at her. So now grief needs to follow a schedule? Flustered, she called for a vote, some desperate attempt to claw back control. I proposed pre-approval for all ceremonies, burials, memorials, flags, and any gathering over 4 people, she announced. Only 2 hands rose, hers and her lapdog on the board. Then a voice called out from the back. We didn't know we could ignore her. Laughter broke the tension. That night, David called, "You want to see this?" The files he'd uncovered told a story. One Susan had written with greed and control. Thousands of dollars in unexplained transfers. Fake invoices for landscaping that never happened. HOA funds wired straight to Susan's PayPal labeled community enrichment. But it went deeper. Susan had hired a private firm to install cameras in birdhouses and inside decorative mailboxes, secretly streaming live footage of her neighbors straight to her laptop. Even children were being watched. It wasn't just nosiness. It was criminal surveillance. And I wasn't going to stop it with a slap on the wrist. As the investigation expanded, Susan began to unravel in public. She stalked around the neighborhood in dark sunglasses, mumbling about government plants and military psyops. Nathan quietly tended James' grave, building a bench with his bare hands, his grip steadier now. Meanwhile, Susan was on the HOA forum again, this time claiming James' burial flag was disturbing local wildlife. One post even said, "Dead soldiers don't belong in living communities." That was it. She wasn't just cruel. She was gone. Neighbors started comparing notes. One was fined because her umbrella cast a disruptive shadow on Susan's lawn. Another for her dog's excessive tail wagging. A third was warned about emotional noise after laughing outside with grandkids past 9 p.m. David's team found hidden microphones inside trail stones and tiny recorders tucked into the stems of fake flowers. Susan had even fake violations, dragging neighbors' trash bins to the curb when they were on vacation just to photograph and find them. I brought the findings to the local police chief. He groaned. She's buried us in complaints for years. Fence heights, Christmas lights, even garden gnomes. I handed him a folder labeled Operation Sparrow. He opened it. She's done. Then Susan did something almost impressive in its arrogance. She sent a cease and desist letter to the Department of Justice, claimed she was a sovereign community, and the investigation was federal harassment. David got the warrant the next morning. We planned a public HOA meeting, one final gathering where the truth could be shown on a projector for everyone to see. It started with the financials. Then came the footage, birdhouse cams, fake violations, payments she marked as community events, but spent on herself. The room erupted. One neighbor shouted about being fined $85 for planting the wrong color tulips. Another waved a notice claiming his car's paint clashed with the seasonal theme. And yet another was cited for overgrown hair. That night, federal agents seized Susan's computer, camera equipment, and personal files. She was hit with charges: wire fraud, privacy invasion, elder abuse after she siphoned money from a vulnerable neighbor's HOA account. But Susan wasn't done yet. She sued me for emotional distress. In court, her lawyer, Gary, one of those sovereign law types who thinks traffic tickets are unconstitutional, fumbled through half-baked arguments about corporate overreach. Her handwritten lawsuit, full of typos, claimed I'd terrorize her. The judge wasn't impressed. He allowed Nathan to testify. My son spoke softly but clearly about losing James, about the guns, the fear, and humiliation. Susan objected, called him manipulative. The judge didn't flinch. "He's burying his brother," he said. "You're whining about mailboxes." Susan tried to submit a conspiracy blog as evidence and screamed about anti-HOA operatives. The court dismissed her suit with sanctions. That afternoon, she was indicted. Wire fraud, criminal surveillance, targeted harassment. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as Susan was arrested trying to sneak out with 2 rolling suitcases and a mug that said Queen of Order. Nathan and I sat under James' tree that evening. The wind was gentle, the air finally quiet. "She thought she owned us," he said. I nodded, but we never belonged to her. Months later, the HOA office, once a fortress of fear, became James Haven, a memorial garden. At the dedication, neighbors brought lawn signs and letters and shredded old HOA violations. Children laughed. A boy chalked on the sidewalk, "Freedom lives here now." Susan was sentenced to 6 years. She sent one letter from prison. It read, "Maybe I mistook control for safety." I filed it under closure. The neighborhood healed. Yellow houses, barking dogs, barbecue smoke in the air. Nathan now speaks of veterans groups, steady, composed, with a quiet light in his eyes. And sometimes in the hush of sunset, I sit by that oak tree and smile. Not because we got revenge, but because we found peace. Because the truth, no matter how long it takes, always tears down lies.